It's difficult to put this into words. I think we're all naive enough at some point to think you could never know someone like who I'm about to tell you about. I won't say his name, so I'll just call him Gary. Gary and I worked together at a fast food place a long time ago. He was always an oddball who was made fun of a lot by other coworkers. Even his own parents made fun of him, or at least his father did anyway. He never had any luck with women, and even into his mid-30s I don't think he ever even had a girlfriend. I know that seems weird to bring up, but that could partially explain the story. After a while, Gary was either fired or told to quit because several girls we worked with had multiple complaints, and it was all for the same thing. We had a bulletin board at work where employees would put their phone numbers to ask for more hours if anyone called off or if they just didn't want to work. Gary would get their numbers and call and text them to ask them out. Naturally, they all bitched about him, telling him that's not appropriate and not the reason they put their numbers up. So, thanks to him, no one, even male employees, were allowed to put their numbers up on the bulletin board anymore. I eventually quit that job and we went our separate ways, but stayed friends on Facebook. I'd even see him in person from time to time when I was out paying bills or running other errands. He started doing freelance photography out of his home, and thought he had finally found his calling. He would do some wedding and prom photos, and they started getting better in terms of production and photo quality. He seemed to be doing really well for himself. That is until late October, early November 2018. I hadn't heard from him in a while and thought he was keeping a low profile because of his political views and it being right before the midterms. A friend of mine, who also happens to be an ex-coworker of both of us, shared an article on Facebook detailing the arrest of a local man on child pornography charges. I thought nothing of it. I was glad they caught the sicko and didn't click on the article because who the hell wants to read the details of someone that heinous? A few more days go by and I'm wondering why I haven't heard or seen from Gary on his Facebook for a while. So, being curious, I went to his profile, and the very first thing that comes up is a post that's getting a lot of angry reactions and blown up with comments calling him a pedophile. At this point, I still hadn't put two and two together. Call me dense. Thankfully, it only took a couple of minutes for me to put the pieces together. And my heart sank. I went back to the article that the other friend had shared with me and clicked on it. Sure enough, he's the one who was arrested. Turns out he had been under FBI surveillance for at least 9 months before they raided his home and business. He engaged in the solicitation and enticement of children, and also sought out to have sex with children on film, on top of the 200 pictures on his computer, including edited photos of children being molested, beaten, and killed. And to top it all off, he was using legitimate pictures of his clients' own kids, photoshopping them to make them look like they were in inappropriate situations. I instantly went back to his profile and blocked him immediately. Not that it would do much, considering if he ever does get out of prison, he will probably never be allowed to access a camera or another recording device, or probably even the internet ever again. To my knowledge, he never succeeded in doing anything to anyone's child, and I'm grateful for that. I hope the parents of all the kids who realized what he was doing can rest easier. They'll probably never use a freelance photographer ever again, and I can't blame them. I hope I never hear about or see that sick bastard ever again. Just for reference, I'm a 22-year-old male, living in the Midwestern tri-state area. The events being told are true to the best of my knowledge. On what seemed at first to be just another night hanging out at my best friend's house doing what a lot of early 20-something-year-olds do for fun, Netflix, Xbox, drinking, etc., turned into something neither of us expected. The two of us were just hanging out playing Call of Duty when we got bored with it. We had some extra cash, and he suggested the idea of buying some cheap gas station wine and getting wine drunk and watching a movie or something. I thought this was a great idea and affirmed his request. So we climbed into the man van and took off. We were crossing the Mississippi River when at the end we saw some police cruisers with their lights flashing. They were in a parking lot of a small shopping mall by the edge of town, close to the bridge. We noticed that there was police tape encircling a medium-sized portion of the parking lot, and that one of those heavy steel public trash bins had been struck with by what seemed to be a car. We'd been having really icy weather, so we figured a car had just slid into the trash bin and either took off or the police had already taken care of it and were just finishing up the paperwork and whatnot. My buddy and I got our wine, and on the way back to his place noticed the police had left, which seemed to confirm our suspicions. Fast forward to the next day, watching the news. I found out how wrong we had been. The cops, the police tape, none of it had to do with a simple car accident. Come to find out, in that same parking lot a woman was stabbed several times by her estranged boyfriend. The knockdown and bent trash bin was from the same boyfriend running her down after she tried to get away. 2 of her 4 children were in the car with him. The woman succumbed to her wounds in the hospital, but was able to give the details of her attacker to a witness before she died. The boyfriend was quickly apprehended and is facing life in prison for first-degree murder. The murder had happened just an hour and a half or less from when my buddy and I drove past the crime scene. While the town in question does have the most crime in the state, it's mostly property crime and murder is extremely rare. A couple of my friends had known or were friends with the poor young woman. The dirtbag that had done it had effectively orphaned their children. Justice will be served, but it's hard to say there's any real justice for those children. It was a hot summer day in the Bible Belt of the southern United States, and my sister and I were playing outside. This is one of the few fond memories I have of us playing like children together, because at the time I was about 6 years old and she was 11 or 12. A budding preteen who would soon have no interest in playing such childlike games with her little sister. Eventually the heat became unbearable, and since we were too poor to have a pool or spend a day at a water park, we convinced our father to play with the water hose. Fortunately, our mother was at work, so she was not there to object. And my father, too exhausted from being away for several days for his job, agreed. Ecstatic, we changed into some old loose play clothes and happily ran outside. We had fun spraying each other and running around in the misty rain for about an hour before our clothes became too wet and heavy to bear, and we sat on the front porch steps, resting in the shade, and watching the cars drive to and fro on the back road about 30 feet from our home. Soon, a slow-driving beige car came to a halt in front of our mailbox and paused there for a moment. We quietly watched it like alert deer until the driver finally rolled the window down. He was a man, seemingly in his mid-20s, with dark, sun-kissed skin and an unkempt afro. He was wearing a long-sleeved, thin, white button-up shirt. He casually rested his arm on the car door and poked his head out, flashing a smile that even for the South seemed too friendly towards a couple of strangers, and said, "How are you ladies doing?" "Good," we politely responded, the teachings of our parents to respect our elders deeply ingrained in us. Now, I was a very sweet child, but I often had mean and almost adult-like thoughts reverberating through my mind. So it was no surprise to me that my first thought was, why does he sound like a little bitch? I did not immediately notice that he was speaking in a slightly higher-pitched tone, hence why his voice cracked a little mid-sentence. "Is your daddy home?" he asked in the same tone. My father was well known in this community, so it was not uncommon for him to get the occasional random visitors when he was home. We said yes, but he was sleeping and asked him if he wanted us to wake our dad up. "No, that's fine," he quickly insisted. But we stood up, saying it was no problem and he wouldn't be grouchy if we woke him up. Before we even opened our front gate, he sped off, his car audibly straining from how hard he pressed down the gas pedal. I looked at my sister wide-eyed, still trying to make sense of what had just happened. My sister, a sense of realization and adrenaline briefly flashing across her eyes, looked at me with a soft smile and said, "We should go inside." I was a little dejected, but deep down I firmly understood the importance of her words, and we went inside and told our father. His groggy expression furrowed into a familiar, upset yet protective expression, and he firmly commanded us to shower and continue playing inside. I am very happy that our father was just a short call away. I do not want to think about what would have happened if he hadn't been home. Strangely enough, this is not where the story ends. A few years later, it was my 11th birthday. I had not seen the creepy man since, and he is tucked away in my memories. My mother had planned a surprise birthday party in the fellowship hall of my church, and she'd asked my sister to keep me occupied all day until everything was in place. I was pretty gullible, so I was oblivious to the party until I was greeted with the pleasant surprise in the hall entrance. Funnily enough, I did not really enjoy the party. My parents did not know much about my interest or my friends, so they just invited children from the neighborhood who I didn't really talk to, except on the school bus. They were snobby brats who obviously showed up just for the free food their parents promised them. In addition, there were equally as many people 7 through 15 years older than me who had no business being there other than to pretend to join in the festivities, just to scoff down some hot dogs and cake. I was annoyed, and just ate and drank as much as I could and acted generally cold to most of the guests, in hopes of warding them off and cutting the party short. After unwrapping the gifts, I took the freedom from my birthday obligations to wander around and chat with my sister. In the middle of our conversation, she paused, her eyes fixed on the corner of the fellowship hall. I followed her gaze and landed on a man with dark sun-kissed skin and a shaved head. "That's him," she said in a low voice, despite us being in the very center of a giant room, far from ear's reach. Though her words were vague, my soul immediately understood just who him was. And instead of fear or urgency, I felt anger. My sister was slightly shook, but brushed off how she felt. However, I was pissed and wanted to confront him somehow. She urged me not to make a scene, but I ignored her and angrily stomped towards him until I was just a mere 6 feet from him. I was pissed, but I wasn't stupid. What was I supposed to say to him anyway? It had been so long ago, and everyone would likely just brand me as mental. So I glared at him, with tight lips and my most furious and disappointed expression. I glowered at him for what felt like 5 minutes. He never even looked at me. He just stared at the floor with a deeply troubled expression. I began to pick up on some unresolved sadness radiating from him, but I did not care. This was a children's party, and it was clear that he was out of place and not meant to be there. And soon I watched him get up and leave the building, never returning. After that interaction, I had perked up a little and continued to enjoy the party with my sister. We never spoke about him again. We didn't need to. For some reason, I was satisfied with it all, for it felt like it was finally a chapter in my life I could close. Additionally, perhaps I somehow prevented him from taking advantage of another child. I have not seen the man since. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe, share it with your friends, all that good stuff. Not like it's really gonna matter because YouTube is kind of crazy at the moment, but it is what it is. Hit the notification button. Just do it. Yes. Do it really good. Yes. I hope everyone's having a great day, and I really do appreciate you checking out this video. And if you would like to help support the channel, make sure you check out my Patreon page, get yourself some cool perks. And if you would like to submit your own story, email it to urmaker6260@gmail.com. I will catch you all in the next video. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true. Bad bye.